Hi and welcome to Blocks. In this video, I want to explain how to use the Process tab within Blocks to build your own customized investment process. We're going to cover off on what is an investment process within Blocks, what are the elements of an investment process, in particular, what are investment factors and how to use them, how to edit a process or an investment factor, and how to create a new process or factor. So the core of the Blocks software is creating your own customized process. What does this mean? Within Blocks, an investment process is simply a collection of investment factors. And investment factors are the things that you think are relevant to making an investment. To see how this works within the app, we can navigate to the Process tab, and for an example, we're going to use the generic process, which all users will start with as their default process. And within this, we can see the existing investment factors here, such as balance sheet, management, business quality, current valuation. But an investment factor can be anything that you choose to add, and we'll show how that's done in just a minute. We'll return to our investment factors in a minute. Before we do so, just a description of some of the other elements that make up an investment process. So we obviously have the name, in this case generic process, but that can be edited quite easily. Similarly, we have a description, and that can also be edited in line. There's also the author of the process and when this was last edited. A couple of important buttons over here. Firstly, whether the process is a default process or not. In this case, we have no, but if we were to make this a default process, firstly to note that it would replace our existing default process. You must have at least one default process, and that process will be associated with all investments, and we'll come back to that, what that means in the Investments tab. In this case, we won't make this our default process. We also have a button here to determine whether our process is active or not. Again, a simple yes/no button. If the process is active, it means two things. Firstly, your process will show up in your list of active processes, and secondly, you can associate this process with an investment. We'll come back to that in our investments video. The next element of our processes is the investment factors, which are obviously the key part of your process. As we mentioned, an investment factor is basically anything that you think is relevant for you to make an investment decision. And in the generic process that you start with under the system, we've created 4 factors: balance sheet management, business quality, and current valuation. A bit like the process itself, we've got some generic elements associated with each factor, being the name, which again you can edit easily, the description. We then have the group. Currently there are 4 groups available: financial, operational, governance, or valuation. Putting a factor in a group simply helps you to organise those factors and will help in the visual display of your process. Then we get on to the key part of the investment factor, which is the results. And note that the results type will be influenced by the type of factor that you classify. At the moment, you can classify a factor as either a qualitative factor or a valuation factor. So let's talk through these in detail. For a qualitative factor, we have a scoring system that runs from excellent through to very poor. And note that in a quantitative sense, each of these scores will be associated with a number. So excellent equates to +3, very good +2, all the way through to 0 for an average, and -1, -2, and -3 for very poor. We'll talk more about scoring in the investments video. For a qualitative factor, essentially you assign your score based on a subjective assessment, and when you're setting up your process, you can put in a description of what each score corresponds to. So in this case, for balance sheet, an excellent balance sheet means, in our definition, we have significant surplus cash and liquidity, but again, very easy to add descriptions to these factors. and apply. Second type of factor we have is a valuation factor, possibly a more interesting factor for most investors. And in this case, we have a slightly different set of results. We still have the same ranking of excellent through to very poor, which corresponds to +3, +2, etc., down to -3. But in this case, our scores are derived relative to the share price. So what this table is showing us is that if the share price, if there is upside of more than 100% from the share price to my valuation target, that would rank as excellent. So if I had a valuation of $1 and the share price was currently sitting at 40 cents, then our upside to that valuation would be over 100%. That would be excellent. Similarly, if my valuation was 50 cents and the share price was currently $1 and currently 50% downside, so that would be a very poor valuation. It's easy to change these simply by dragging each item, and so you can set your own ranking systems as to what constitutes which score. Next element to talk about is how to edit an investment process or an investment factor. As we've seen, for both factors and process, certain elements can be edited directly in the screen, so we can change the name quite easily for both the process and factors, change the description and certain other elements. However, we can also get more detail by clicking on the Add Remove button, which will take us through to the process editor. In this case, what we're doing is editing our generic process by selecting factors. So in this case, we have 4 factors, and I have created a series of other factors, and it is simple for me to add additional factors to my process or to remove those factors. If I add them, click Apply, you'll see that those factors now appear within my process. Note that it's exactly the same process for adding or creating a process. This is my list of active processes. These are my inactive processes. I can add my test process, essentially makes it active. I hit Apply, the test process comes up here. And if I edit that, you can see that it is now an active process, but it has no factors with it. And this leads us to our final part of the process tab, which is creating new processes and factors. So, same process for each. Go through the process editor. In this case, I'm going to create a new process simply by clicking on the Create New. I'm creating a new process. I give it a name, New Test Process number 2. Description, whether it's going to make this default or active, I'll leave it as an active process. Click Apply, and it takes me through to this new test process where I can add or remove factors. Click on this, I get through to the process editor. I have no factors here. I have a set of existing factors that I can choose from to add, but I can also create a new factor. So in this case, I'm creating a new factor rather than a new process. New excellent factor name, description, assign the group, we'll make it an operational factor, and the type will be qualitative, and I can add my descriptions for each score. My new excellent factor is now in my active factors list, and I can add it to my process. And I now have a new process, new test process number 2 with 3 factors associated with it. So that's basically the process tab in a nutshell. You can get as detailed or as brief as you like. I think that trick will be start with a simple process and add to that as time goes on. For those of you who are interested, you can now look at the investments video where we will review how to review an investment.